In the middle of the 18th century, a wooden ship left a northern European harbour with silver locked below deck and China waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. The men on board were not crossing oceans for gold, oil, or land. They were risking storms, reefs, pirates, hunger, and disease for dried leaves. Those leaves were tea. Packed into chests and sealed against salt air, they could turn a dangerous voyage into a fortune. A captain who brought them home safely could make merchants rich. A ship that vanished could erase investments, families, and reputations in one line on a ledger. All for something that now sits beside sugar and instant coffee, cheap enough to forget. That is the strange power of tea. It looks gentle. It steams quietly in a cup. It belongs to rainy mornings, tired afternoons, hotel rooms, office desks, grandmother's kitchens, and supermarket shelves. But behind that calm surface is a history of monks, emperors, smugglers, queens, plantation workers, opium dealers, revolutionaries, spies, clipper ships, factories, and empires. Tea did not become powerful because it was loud. It became powerful because people wanted it every day. One cup became a habit became a market became a monopoly became a war. And when empires discovered that a simple drink could pull silver across oceans and command loyalty in millions of homes, tea stopped being just a drink and became a system. So how did a wild evergreen shrub from the mountains of southwestern China become the most consumed prepared drink on earth after water? How did it move from medicine to ritual, from palace fashion to colonial obsession, from guarded Chinese secret to global commodity? And why does something so peaceful carry so much conflict inside it? The story does not begin in England, Boston, or a Victorian tea room. It begins much earlier, in mist, forest, mountain soil, and a plant humans first met before anyone knew it would one day move the world. If you like stories where ordinary food turns into empire, trade, obsession, and hidden history, subscribe to Food Empire's History. Now, to understand how tea became this powerful, we have to go back to where the story really begins. Long before tea became polite, it was wild. In the humid highlands of southwestern China, especially around Yunnan and the borderlands near Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam, tea grew as a forest plant, not a product. Its leaves were glossy and bitter. Its branches reached through fog, monsoon air, and slopes where paths turned slick after rain. The plant was Camellia sinensis, the same species behind green tea, black tea, white tea, oolong, pu-erh, and almost every true tea in the world. The difference between a pale green cup and a dark breakfast tea is not a different crop. It is heat, air, timing, oxidation, drying, rolling, and human control. One plant learned many languages through human hands. The oldest tea stories are wrapped in legend. One Chinese tradition tells of the mythical emperor Shennong resting beneath a tea tree while water boiled nearby. Leaves drifted into the pot, the water changed color, and the emperor tasted the accidental infusion. It is probably not history in the strict sense, but myths often preserve a deeper truth. Someone noticed that these bitter leaves did something to the body. Before tea was pleasure, it was function. People chewed the leaves, boiled them, pressed them into rough forms, and used them as medicine, stimulant, digestive aid, and forest knowledge. The taste was not the soft comfort of modern tea. It was sharp, grassy, astringent, sometimes smoky or earthy, closer to a remedy than hospitality. Over centuries, Chinese communities learned to shape the leaf. They steamed it, dried it, compressed it, stored it, traded it, and carried it across difficult terrain. Tea bricks could travel better than fresh leaves. They could be stacked, counted, taxed, and exchanged. A wild plant became a portable source of warmth, alertness, and value. For a long time, tea belonged mostly to medicine, monasteries, local elites, and regional trade. Then China's dynasties began to turn the leaf into culture. During the Tang period, tea moved into cities, poetry, taxation, ritual, and refined daily life. What had once been bitter plant medicine began to acquire rules. No figure represents this change better than Lu Yu. Raised in a world shaped by Buddhist practice, he treated tea with the seriousness of philosophy. He traveled through tea regions, studied water, tools, growing methods, preparation, and the character of leaves. When he wrote The Classic of Tea, he made tea worthy of a book by itself. That book changed the drink. Tea was no longer just boiled leaves. It had correct vessels, correct water, correct timing, correct attention. The person making tea became part cook, part scholar, part ritual specialist. In a society where refinement mattered, knowing tea could signal education and rank. A cup could separate the cultivated from the ordinary. The state noticed. Governments do not ignore habits that millions of people repeat every day. Tea could be taxed, licensed, transported, and regulated. The more people drank it, the more valuable it became to rulers. When a craving becomes predictable, power follows it. The leaf that once grew freely in mountain mist became a source of imperial revenue. Tea also crossed into religion. Buddhist monks drank it because it helped them stay awake during meditation. As Buddhism moved from China into Korea and Japan, tea traveled with monks, texts, and ritual objects. It did not spread like a casual refreshment, it spread as a companion to concentration. In Japan, powdered green tea, later known as matcha, entered elite religious and warrior culture. Samurai valued it not only as a stimulant, but as a discipline of attention. In time, the Japanese tea ceremony transformed the drink into a choreography of humility, silence, movement, and restraint. A small room could force great men to bow. But status always has an edge. When tea becomes refinement, some people are included and others are excluded. The farmer who grows the leaf rarely owns the ceremony. The servant who boils the water may never be praised for the taste. The ruler taxes the trade. The scholar writes the rules. The worker carries the baskets. By the time loose leaf steeping became common in Ming China, tea looked much closer to the drink most people know today. Instead of boiling heavy bricks with salt and aromatics, drinkers steeped leaves in hot water and watched the liquor brighten, darken, and release fragrance. This made tea more elegant, more portable, and more desirable to outsiders. Europe arrived late. Portuguese traders encountered tea through Asian trading networks, but at first it remained a curiosity. Dutch merchants were quicker to see the commercial possibility. Ships returning to Amsterdam brought tea as a luxury for people wealthy enough to pay for distance. You did not drink tea because it was normal. You drank it because the world had reached your table. Then tea entered the English court. Catherine of Braganza, the Portuguese princess who married King Charles II, was already a tea drinker. At court, fashion was a machine. If royalty drank tea, aristocrats copied. If aristocrats copied, merchants supplied. If merchants supplied, the habit spread. A foreign taste became a social signal, then a national obsession. London changed around the cup. Tea houses appeared. Porcelain cups became objects of taste. Sugar, milk, and tea formed a triangle of empire in the British imagination. But Britain did not grow tea. China did. China held the plants, the processing skill, the growers, the ports, and the power to decide how much outsiders could buy. This created one of the great trade problems of the 18th and 19th centuries. Britain wanted Chinese tea in enormous quantities, but China did not want British goods in equal return. Silver flowed east. British merchants watched wealth leave their ledgers and accumulate in Chinese hands. A daily habit in British homes had become a national balance of trade crisis. At this point, tea stopped being food and became a geopolitical machine. The question was no longer whether people liked the drink. They did. The question was who would control the supply, who would pay for it, and what an empire was willing to do when its favorite habit depended on another civilization's guarded plant. Britain found a commodity that China did not officially want, but millions of people could be made to crave. Opium, grown under British imperial power in India, was smuggled into China through private traders and corrupt networks. The logic was cold. Tea pulled silver from Britain to China. Opium pulled silver back from China toward the British Empire. By the 1830s, the social damage in China was enormous. Addiction spread through families, workplaces, official circles, and port cities. Chinese authorities tried to suppress the trade, and in Canton, they destroyed a vast stockpile of foreign opium. Britain responded with war. Tea was not the only cause, but it helped create the trade imbalance that made opium so profitable. The result was devastating. China was defeated, ports were forced open, and Hong Kong was ceded to Britain. A second war followed later, deepening foreign pressure and humiliation. Behind the treaties, cannons, and diplomatic language was a brutal truth. One empire's thirst for tea helped feed a drug trade that shattered lives in another society. But Britain did not want to depend on China forever. Buying tea was expensive. Smuggling opium was dangerous and morally poisonous. The stronger solution, from an imperial point of view, was to steal the plant, steal the knowledge, and grow tea somewhere Britain controlled. That is where Robert Fortune enters the story. In the mid-19th century, the East India Company sent this Scottish botanist into China on a mission that sounds almost like a spy novel because it was one. Foreigners were restricted from many tea-growing regions, and Chinese tea processing knowledge was guarded carefully. Fortune disguised himself and moved through places he was not supposed to see. He did not simply take seeds, he studied the whole system, how leaves were plucked, withered, rolled, heated, oxidized, sorted, and packed. He collected plants and seeds and used Wardian glass cases, portable greenhouses, to keep them alive across ocean voyages. He also helped transfer skilled Chinese tea workers to British-controlled India. Because plants alone were not enough, empire needed technique. In India, British ambitions met both imported Chinese plants and native Assam tea varieties, already growing in the northeast. Plantations spread through Assam and Darjeeling, and later through Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. Hillsides were cleared, estates were surveyed, labor systems were built, railways, ports, nurseries, and factories followed the leaf. China's monopoly began to break. For British merchants, this was triumph. For many workers, it was hardship. Tea plantations required disciplined, repetitive, low-paid labor. Leaves had to be plucked carefully and constantly. Baskets filled in heat, rain, mud, and steep terrain. In Ceylon, Tamil laborers from southern India were moved into plantation systems that often trapped families in poverty for generations. The tea plant looked green and beautiful on the hillside, but the plantation was a machine made of land, labor, debt, and discipline. Workers lived near the crop, rose with the crop, and survived according to the crop's demands. The people who drank the tea imagined misty mountains and clean refreshment. They did not imagine the aching fingers that selected 2 leaves and a bud again and again. Tea also changed land itself. Forests were cut into estates. Biodiversity gave way to rows of cultivated bushes. Local economies were reorganized around export. In the British imagination, India and Ceylon became tea landscapes, but those landscapes were engineered to serve imperial consumption. The pleasure had a price, and the price was usually paid far from the parlour. While Britain built its tea empire in Asia, tea was creating rebellion across the Atlantic. In the North American colonies, tea was already a daily drink and a political object. The issue was taxation, monopoly, smuggling, parliament, and the right to be governed with consent. When the Tea Act allowed the East India Company to sell directly into the colonies while a tax remained, many colonists saw a trap hidden inside a cheaper cup. On a cold December night in Boston, men boarded 3 tea ships and threw hundreds of chests into the harbor. The water filled with broken leaves and splintered wood. It was spectacular destruction of property, but also political theatre. Tea had become a symbol of empire so clear that dumping it into the sea could announce a revolution. The Boston Tea Party did not create every cause of the American Revolution, but it sharpened the conflict. British punishment followed. Colonial resistance hardened. In a real sense, tea helped turn argument into rupture. A drink associated with British identity became, for many American patriots, something to reject. Coffee rose not only as a preference, but as a political habit. Then machines and industrial life changed it again. In Britain, the Industrial Revolution made tea more than a luxury. It became fuel for a working nation. Factory shifts were long, cities were crowded, water could be unsafe, and alcohol was a constant social problem. Tea offered caffeine, warmth, routine, and boiled water in a form people enjoyed. Shipping became part of the spectacle. In the age of the tea clippers, sleek sailing ships raced from China toward London with fresh seasoned tea, their canvas stretched hard against wind. Newspapers followed the arrivals, merchants waited for the first cargoes. Speed meant premium prices. Fresh tea carried urgency. One of the most important modern inventions was not elegant at all. It was the tea bag. In the early 20th century, American tea merchant Thomas Sullivan sent tea samples in small pouches. Customers placed the pouches directly into hot water instead of emptying them out. The mistake was useful. Soon cheaper materials replaced silk, and the tea bag made brewing faster, cleaner, and easier. Iced tea added another turn. In the United States, where coffee had already beaten hot tea as the national daily drink, cold tea became a different mass habit. Sweet tea in the American South, bottled iced tea in vending machines, lemon tea at lunch counters, canned tea in convenience stores. Tea adapted to climate, sugar, glass, ice, plastic, and branding. Around the world, tea kept localizing. In India, chai became one of the great street drinks of the modern world, boiled with milk, sugar, ginger, cardamom, and other spices until it turned fragrant and alive. Chaiwalas poured it from kettles into small cups for commuters, workers, students, and travelers. The British pushed tea cultivation through empire, but Indians transformed the drink into something deeply their own. Modern tea appears peaceful because the supply chain hides its scale. More than 50 countries produce tea. China remains the largest producer, with India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, Turkey, and others shaping the global market. The world produces millions of tons a year. Millions of farmers, workers, pickers, packers, traders, drivers, auctioneers, factory hands, and shopkeepers are tied to the leaf. The supermarket shelf makes this easy to miss. Tea is divided into calm categories: English breakfast, Earl Grey, green tea, jasmine, mint, ginger, rooibos, even though it is not true tea, wellness blends, sleep blends, matcha powder, bottled tea, bubble tea, kombucha, sweet tea. The shelf is quiet, but it is also a map of empire, medicine, marketing, ritual, and modern anxiety. That is the hidden system. Tea sells comfort and control at the same time. It promises energy without the harshness of coffee, calm without sleep, health without effort, tradition without study, luxury without much cost. A box of tea can look natural, spiritual, British, Japanese, Indian, Moroccan, clean, cozy, ancient, or modern, depending on the design. The leaf is old, the branding is constantly new. Matcha shows this perfectly. For centuries, powdered green tea was tied to Buddhist practice and Japanese ceremony. Then, in the 21st century, it became a global wellness symbol. Cafes poured matcha lattes into white cups. Influencers photographed bright green foam. Bakeries filled pastries with matcha cream. A ritual of attention became a lifestyle product for distracted people. But the modern industry still carries pressure. Climate change threatens tea-growing regions with heat, drought, erratic rainfall, pests, and shifting harvests. Tea is sensitive to place. Altitude, mist, soil, rain, and temperature all shape quality. When weather changes, leaves change. When yields fall, workers and small farmers often feel the pain first. Labor questions remain too. Tea picking is still physically demanding, and in many regions it is still performed largely by women. Wages, housing, healthcare, land rights, pesticide exposure, and fair pricing remain part of the cup whether the package mentions them or not. The old distance between the drinker and the worker has narrowed in theory, but not always in reality. And still people drink tea. They drink it when they wake up, when they are sick, when guests arrive, when work drags, when grief sits in the room, when the weather turns cold, when the stomach feels unsettled, when they need a pause they can hold with both hands. This is why tea survived every transformation. It attaches itself to moments humans repeat. The next time you drop a tea bag into a cup, watch what happens. The water darkens slowly. A leaf that may have grown on a Chinese mountain, an Indian estate, a Kenyan smallholding, or a Sri Lankan hillside releases color into your kitchen. It looks like a small private act, but it is not private at all. It is a quiet meeting with thousands of years of human history. Inside that cup are the forests of Yunnan, the discipline of monks, the writings of scholars, the silence of Japanese tea rooms, the ambitions of European merchants, the silver roads to Canton, the violence of the opium trade, the stolen knowledge of botanists, the labor of plantation workers, the protest in Boston Harbor, the steam of factories, and the convenience of the tea bag. Tea is powerful because it learned how to be many things at once: medicine and pleasure, ritual and commodity, comfort and control, rebellion and empire, luxury and daily habit. It can be served in a palace, a train station, a street stall, a soldier's cup, a hospital room, a student's mug, or a paper cup beside a laptop, and somehow it still feels like tea. That is why the history matters. Ordinary foods are never as ordinary as they look. They carry the hands that grew them, the ships that moved them, the rulers who taxed them, the companies that branded them, the workers who made them cheap, and the cultures that gave them meaning. Tea does not shout that history. It waits until the water is hot, then releases it slowly. So the next time someone says it is only tea, remember what that little cup has already done. It crossed mountains, entered monasteries, seduced courts, drained silver, fed empire, provoked war, fueled revolution, built plantations, comforted workers, changed mornings, and became one of humanity's most repeated rituals. Tea is never just tea. It never was. If this story changed the way you see tea, subscribe for more hidden food history.